Today we're going to talk to Susan Phelps, who is EVSC's Director of Neuroeducation, about GAIN. So, Susan, thanks for coming in today and talking to us. Um, you know, just recently we put together a video and we shared that on social media about GAIN and about the work we're doing. So just wanted to have a quick conversation with you to follow that up, and certainly we want to have some more in-depth conversations with you here as the weeks go by. So in the video that we released, we talk a lot about the brain. The students do a great job in the video, and they say we're working on our brain. So if I'm listening to this as a parent, what does that mean when you say I'm working on my brain?
Well, the idea of GAIN is to really take what the field is learning about neuroscience and neuroeducation and bringing that into the classroom and really having an emphasis on developing the whole child. Obviously, academics really strengthens our cognitive abilities, but for whole child development and ensuring that they're successful throughout every stage of life, it's important to and essential to focus on emotional development, pro-social development, and our kids' social development. All of those skills and eventually develop our self-regulation abilities, but an intentional focus, strengthening those neural pathways and some of the foundational skills that are needed as part of GAIN.
So let me back up for just a second then on that regard, Susan. So first of all, a word you mentioned, it's mentioned in the video as well, self-regulation. So what are we talking about with self-regulation?
So self-regulation is, it's a term that's being used a lot now. Self-regulation is the ability to pause, which is that executive functioning skill that's talked about in the video, and then to really send that information to the what we call the thinking part of the brain, so that the kids can decide what to do, act upon something, whether it's problem solve, making a decision, collaborating in a group. And interestingly enough, collaboration requires us to have good social awareness, good social skills, good emotional self-regulation, the ability to manage intense emotion. So
when you're talking about self-regulation, you're certainly not using that term just for children in a classroom. I mean, that is for, so what does self-regulation look like for a student or for an adult?
Well, so let me just talk about the students for a moment. What self-regulation would look like for a student is, let's say you're getting ready to have a birthday party and they're excited about the birthday party. You have to manage those intense emotions. I think we've all seen kids try to wait, right? You can see them hopping up and down and being excited. That's in some ways self-regulation, the ability to, they're showing their excitement, but they're not acting upon their excitement. And as emotions become more complex, so let's say you're somebody knocks your cell phone out of your hand, right? The ability to respond appropriately in that moment requires social and pro-social and emotional self-regulation.
In other words, not to snap and get immediately angry, that type of thing.
Correct. You have to be able to pause. The reacting, which is also talked about in the movie, would be to just do something inappropriate to the other person. And maybe it happened on accident, but you would want to be able to pause, take a look around, and see what just happened, and then make a decision. That pausing, thinking, and making a decision is self-regulation. The pausing are your executive functioning skills. So those are two different things, but intentionally developed within the GAIN framework.
So then clearly those same social emotional skills in terms of self-regulating would benefit you as an adult at the workplace,
absolutely,
working with your own children in the home.
Yeah, I think some of the challenges adults have, which is why teaching uses so much energy, is many are leaving their homes in the morning, getting their kids ready for school and driving to work and having their own responsibilities. But then in the classroom, they're what we call the co-regulators for students. So they're constantly managing the students' emotions to try to help keep them focused. We call it a productive struggle, so that kids have the opportunity to develop those neural pathways to think about more complex information without getting frustrated. They need the teacher to develop those skills, so it just uses so much energy for the teacher. So they have to be self-regulated all day to be able to do that.
So much of our work now in our classrooms, and really we're just getting started. I mean, we're really working on this, but we're not at full implementation yet, but that's our goal.
Correct.
Is this not something that schools for generations have been focusing on, or did they know it and they just didn't know how to directly bring it into the classroom? What's new? How's this changed?
Well, I think, first of all, the intentionality of it.
Okay.
And I think from an educational standpoint, as there's been sort of over-focus on just cognitive outcomes or high-stakes testing, more and more of activities that develop the whole child have sort of left the daily schedule. So,
So it's almost bringing it back.
So we're bringing back, and I always think, when we first, when you talk to teachers, teachers know that part of their development is missing, and they appreciate having that time built back into their schedule to be able to develop these skills. So I would say it never went away completely in education. I just think it went away enough that, we need to bring it back in intentionally. And then also, again, this field of neuroeducation is understanding what skills really need to be attended to at the different developmental stages to make sure that kids have the opportunities to develop the skills so that they can graduate and be successful.
Well, and that's funny you say that, because I was just going to hit on that point. It's said in the video, you say it all the time. We do this through our work and talk about this. But our goal, of course, with this is not just to make students successful in the classroom this year. I mean, really, our goal is to make them successful at school, at home, in the future, after school, in the workplace. I mean, really, when we talk about GAIN, we're talking about success through every stage of life, correct?
We are. And there's a term, it's called the opportunity gap. And that opportunity gap comes from those lack of early experiences that build these critical neural pathways that develop students' executive functioning and self-regulation skills. So you can't look at just the outcome of a high-stakes testing and say, well, we didn't do reading enough, or we checked a lot of boxes, because these skills, the self-regulation skills, are better predictors of life success for our students. And so the intentionality and having those, which is one of the reasons we started in elementary, developing those foundational skills will set them up for success in middle school, high school, and then whatever they decide to do after graduation.
And am I correct in saying a lot of these skills you're talking about are the same skills that we hear from employers who are hiring individuals, graduates of our school, that they're looking for in employees?
Correct. So when you look at some of the surveys, and one that we typically share is one that was done in 2015, the skills that employers say candidates are lacking are critical thinking, problem solving, the ability to collaborate, and
work with people that maybe look at things
with
differently,
others.
maybe think differently.
And what's interesting is, and I think this is just an important piece of it. In order for students to learn how to do that, you can't learn it through just a lesson that says, be nice to your friends, right? You have to actively engage in self-regulation. That's the only way that it develops. So if I tell you, Jason, if somebody accidentally pushes you, don't hit them back, right? You might know that rule, but the ability to use that rule in the moment when you're upset is self-regulation. And the only way you get good at that is to practice it.
So it's really no different than reading skills, basketball skills. If
Yep.
you don't practice it, you have to know it, but then you have to practice so that it becomes, I guess, is it accurate to say almost a habit or second nature?
Habit, motor memory.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. To pause and then look around, which is social self-regulation, and then decide what to do. All of that requires thinking and problem solving.
Okay.
And it also requires you to have what we call a manageable stress load in that moment. And so that's a whole nother piece of the work that we work on continuously to help our students manage their stress load so that they can engage in that complex critical thinking.
And so really everything you're talking about is, and I know this is a term that you hear used widely now, but when we talk about whole child instruction, the video we just did, we referenced that. This is what you're talking about, right? Whole child, not just reading or math skills, but all of the skills.
Correct. In our framework, when we're looking at developing the whole child, we first start with the conditions for teaching and the conditions for learning. Those are foundational to being able to then develop executive functioning skills, take advantage of the curriculum. So we talked about the cell curriculum, not any different than math or reading curriculum. But then the application are the opportunities that we create for students to apply that knowledge and practice those skills throughout the school day. And that's the part that I think really is unique about what we do with GAIN, and the opportunities that our students are getting.
Let me ask you this, and then we're going to wrap up this podcast, but we could certainly sit here for a long time to have these conversations, so we're going to revisit this in subsequent podcasts. But for parents listening
Sure.
to this, you have children at home, a child at home, they're in school, or maybe
Sure.
they're almost school age, or maybe they're teenagers.
Right.
What is it you want their takeaway to be? What do you want parents to be thinking about or know about the work we're doing so that they are on board and see this type of thing happening in our schools?
I think what's most important is when we talk about developing the whole child, I think EVSC is sets itself apart in the sense that we are intentionally developing it in a very comprehensive way that doesn't make this part of the work separate from academics, but is a true integration of it. So that as your students enter and go through EVSC, these skills will be intentionally developed, the social, prosocial, cognitive, and emotional self-regulation skills so that they can be successful when they graduate, whatever it is that they decide that they want to do. And not just from a professional standpoint, but both within their families and communities.
Okay. Great information, Susan. Thanks for joining us today. Lots of conversations
Yes,
to
lots
come
of
on this
conversation.
topic.
Thanks, Jason.